Good morning, everybody. I'd like to get the session started, so please continue to enjoy your coffee and finish your breakfast if you're still eating, but we want to keep the morning moving so everyone can get back to their real jobs today and participate as well as we can this morning and take advantage of the legislators we have here who are going to speak to us a little later. First of all, my name, for those of you that I have not had the opportunity to meet yet, is John Smolenski. I'm the new Executive Director of the Chamber of Commerce, and on behalf of myself and the Board of Directors of the Wakefield Lynnfield Chamber of Commerce, welcome and thank you very much for being here this morning. I'm very happy to have had the opportunity to come to work in the Wakefield, Lynnfield area. I've been through this community many times for different occasions, but having the opportunity to be here this morning with all of you, and considering half of you spent the night without water, without heat, you all look pretty good when you have to when you think about it. I suppose we have to give a tip of our cap to Pete Dion in the Wakefield Municipal Light Department because they kept the lights on for us. I live in Georgetown and I'm a light commissioner. We don't have lights, and Mr. Dion was kind enough to remind me of that this morning, that Georgetown has no lights and Wakefield does. So Pete, thank you so much for highlighting that and starting my day with a bang. You're very gracious. You know, coming to a community like Wakefield and Lynnfield, not being within the community, I'm able to appreciate, I think, a lot of the fine qualities that these two communities have to offer. They're both very vibrant communities. They're both very active communities. They're both economically sound. There's good leadership. I enjoy the people that I've met so far. I've spent most of my last 3 weeks in the Wakefield area. I have yet to get over to Lynnfield, but I'll correct that very soon. But from what I've seen, the activities in each town are very strong and very, very active with various groups within the community. A great deal of civic pride within both communities. Both communities are very proud of the qualities and the characteristics of their own town, and that's a strong starting point for my position coming in as the Executive Director of a chamber. Wanting to get things moving, if they're already retarded in their progress, would make it very difficult. But coming into a community, communities like Wakefield and Lynnfield, where there's already so much going on, it's just a matter of me getting up to speed and catching up to what everyone else is doing. With that being said, I'm looking forward to it. I hope I get the opportunity to meet as many of you as possible. It's going to take me a while to remember your names. I'll be honest about that. I have to check my wallet in the morning to see who I am. But there's so many individuals that have come up and wished me well. It's been such a welcoming experience. I can't help but have good feelings and a positive vibe about how things are going to move in the future as we continue to work together for the best for both communities. With that being said, I'm not going to bore you with any more of a speech from me because we have speakers here who are here to educate you and inform you of what's going on in the legislature. But I'd like to formally acknowledge some special guests within our communities that are here. First, Town Administrator from Wakefield, Steve Mayo. Steve. That didn't take long, did it? So much for the cooperation. Thank you, Steve. I'm going to sit you at Pete's table next time. I also would like to welcome the Chairman of the Board of Selectmen, Mr. Paul Donaco. Paul. Board Member Maureen Butt. I think I said that right, Maureen. Thank you. And Board Member Ed Dombrowski. And in this corner, weighing in at 195, we have Town Administrator, also very new to the area, Rob Dolan. Rob, thank you very much for coming this morning. And was that a challenge going back and forth? And Board Member Dick Dalton from Lynnfield as well. Dick? I'd also like to take a moment to thank 4 Points for hosting us. This is a terrific venue to have this kind of opportunity to get together. They do a great job. Let's give them a round of applause. The food out there was going fast and furious, so I'm not sure if there's anybody from 4 Points in here, but if not, I'll make sure I thank them because it's a great venue and they've done a nice job putting this together for us. I'd also like to acknowledge our 2 gold sponsors and ask a representative from each to come up and bring greetings to you on this wonderful morning. And I'd like to start with our friends from the Savings Bank and ask Rachel Callery to come up. Rachel is the Senior Vice President and Senior Retail Banking Officer. Rachel?
Thank you, John. Good morning, everyone. On behalf of the bank, I'd just like to welcome you and say that we are very happy to sponsor this morning's breakfast. The Chamber was gracious enough to give me a couple of minutes, and I'd love nothing more than to give a shameless plug as to why you should all be banking at the Savings Bank, community bank since 1869, innovative products, consumers, businesses. So I won't do that, but you can all speak to me anytime personally. But you get the point, right? I would like to offer a warm welcome to our new Chamber President, John Smolinski. It's been great getting to know him, and I think he's going to do a great job for all of us here. So that's so happy to have him on board, and we look forward to working with him. I'd also like to thank the Chamber team and Board of Directors for everything that they do to bring these wonderful programs to all of us. They really work hard to bring us meaningful programs, and we really appreciate that. And I'd especially like to thank our elected officials that have taken their time today to come join all of us this morning. We really appreciate it. So with that, I hope you enjoy the program.
Thank you, Rachel. And I want to now introduce from Leahy Health, the Vice President of Government Relations, Scott Hartman. Scott?
Thanks. Good morning, everybody. Hello, coming from an air mattress. I think I had probably one of the best sales pitches of my life as I walked into my brother-in-law's house at 11 o'clock last night with my entire family. Said, please take us in. I don't know how it's going to go tonight, but NSTAR is now telling me probably Sunday or Monday for us. So, Paul, we're going to be showing up at your house. Thank you all, and we're so pleased. Leahy Health is so pleased to be helping to host this morning's breakfast, and we're very excited to be expanding our services to the Lynnfield Market Street facility. We're really excited about that. The steel is up, so it looks like Leahy Health has avoided the 25% tax on tariff on the steel, so we're very excited about that. We'll be offering primary care for adults and children, and we'll have a walk-in urgent care center there 7 days a week, and we'll have specialty services there as well. And new consumer features we hope to bring online: weekday, evening, and weekend appointments, and online and same-day appointments. So we're very excited about coming to Market Street and working with all of you. And we'll keep you posted as we get closer to opening day. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. I also want you to know I have asked them to turn the AC on. I know it's a little warm in here. How does everyone feel? Is it comfortable, or should I keep it going? Turn it down? Turn it up. There we go. All right, we'll work on that.
Once we get the hot air from the legislators,
Hey, you don't know me well enough. You shouldn't leave me an easy. That's a softball. I'm sorry, Mr. Minardi. With that, let's get right into the meat of the program and the core of our agenda here this morning, and that is to meet our legislators personally once again and have them have the opportunity to address us and speak to us about the things on their agenda and what's happening at the legislative teams, Senate and House, and in the State House, and let us know how that's going to impact us, hopefully positively, not negatively, and let us know what their priorities are for the upcoming year. With that, I'd like to start by introducing to you Senator Jason Lewis. Senator?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's great to be with you. I also want to welcome John as the new executive director, and we're very much looking forward to working with you and everybody else who's active with the Wakefield Lynnfield Chamber. Our chambers of commerce are so important to the vitality and the well-being of our local communities, and we very much, on behalf of myself and our entire legislative delegation, we really appreciate the partnership that we have, in working together on behalf of our local businesses and our residents. So I thought I would just give you an update on a few different issues that may be of interest to you and things that we're working on your behalf on Beacon Hill. And I'll try to make sure there's nothing left for my state representative colleagues to talk about. No, I'm just kidding. There's plenty to discuss, lots of different issues. Just big picture, first of all, I thought would be helpful. Governing Magazine, I think this was last year or maybe the year before, named Massachusetts actually the strongest state economy in the nation. And that's something, of course, we all can be very proud of and feel good about. It doesn't happen by accident. It's a lot of hard work over many, many years. We have a historically low unemployment rate right now. We've got strong state GDP growth. In general, things are pretty good. That said, we do need to recognize the challenges that we're facing in our overall, macro economy. And frankly, those are challenges that are pretty similar to national labor and workforce challenges we're facing. So just quickly, some of those. A recent survey by the Massachusetts Business Alliance for Education of employers in the state found that 2/3 of employers were having trouble finding workers with the right skills to meet their needs. And I don't know how much of an issue that is for many of you in your businesses. I suspect that is a challenge. But that's something that we're acutely aware of. In fact, Representative Brodeur and I serve as the co-chairs of the Labor and Workforce Development Committee. So we spend a lot of time together in the district and at the State House. And our main priority in the work of that committee is ways to strengthen our workforce development systems, our job training systems, our pathways for our young people, in terms of different options available to them in high school and post-high school. And all of that is focused on understanding where the jobs of the future are, what the needs of our employers are in today and into the future in this region and across Massachusetts, and how do we best make sure that our workers of the future are well qualified, well prepared, to fill those jobs. Secondly, we know that many of our workers and many of our families are struggling with wages that are not rising fast enough and make it very difficult to frankly make ends meet, particularly in a very expensive area like this one where we live with high housing costs and other high costs of living. And so again, I think the answer there is to be able to create more opportunities for middle skills jobs and pathways for people to move into the kinds of employment that many of your businesses and organizations offer that do pay a living wage and not just, a minimum wage. So that's something we're very focused on as well. We also in Massachusetts have an aging workforce. 1 in 3 of our workers is actually at or near retirement. And so attracting and retaining young people in our state, many of them obviously come here for higher education, but many then leave the state. So keeping them here, supporting our public community colleges and higher education, because we know those students tend to stay in Massachusetts at disproportionate rates after they graduate, is very important as well, so we can replace those who are retiring. We've also seen a fairly steep decline in teen employment rates, something I'm particularly concerned about. We used to see many more teens working, certainly in the summers, but also even part-time. Even during the school year, and that has declined dramatically over the last several decades, not just in Massachusetts, around the country. And we all know that for teens, getting that early work experience is really important. And there's a lot of research that shows that it'll increase their earning power later in life. So thinking hard about what we do to get more teens opportunities. And some of our communities are doing a really good job of that. Malden's actually a great example, the teen summer employment program they have, but extending that to other communities as well. And then lastly, I wanted to mention on this issue is, on this topic, is the rise of the gig economy. Everyone know what I mean by that? I'm talking about, transportation network services like Lyft and Uber. I'm talking about TaskRabbit and all these others that keep popping up. And you have so many more people today who are, using or are working for these services and these applications. They're not considered employees for the most part. They're considered, independent contractors. And many of them, that's what they want. It gives them the flexibility. But at the same time, it doesn't come with any of the usual protections and benefits that we associate with employment. In other words, there's no health insurance, no workers' compensation, no retirement. So that raises some very profound and challenging questions for our society in terms of, if we've always had an employment-based system for how we provide retirement benefits, health insurance for people, and then we're moving away from that, then what does that mean? How do we provide those kinds of security benefits and essentially a safety net for those people? So those are very challenging questions that we are certainly wrestling with on Beacon Hill. And as I said, since Representative Brodeur and I have the privilege of chairing the Labor and Workforce Development Committee, these are front and center issues that we're thinking about. And we always, on these issues or any issues, always welcome your feedback and your input to us, which is very helpful and very valuable. So that's sort of big picture. I know I don't have a lot of time, so just very quickly wanted to just kind of zoom down a little bit into some of the more local things. And obviously an important priority for me and for our whole delegation is local economic development. What can we do to support working with our local officials, our selectmen and select women, and our school committees, and our planners, and so on, our town managers. What can we do to support our local communities? And a big part of that is really seeing that we have thriving downtowns, thriving main streets. One of the things that I've been working on is together with the Massachusetts Retailers Association, and with some of you know John Hurst, and it actually came out of a breakfast that we did with the Chamber in Reading last year, an idea in talking to John Hurst to create an Office of Main Streets within the state government. And apparently we used to have that years and years ago. We were one of the first states, and then somehow it got, it got cut out of the budget somewhere along the way. So we filed legislation to recreate this. This would be an office that provides technical support, best practices, information, potentially grants to our local chambers, to our local Main Streets organizations, and to other groups that are working to really revitalize and energize and bring businesses and jobs into local communities. And I'm pleased to report that that legislation, even though it's a newly filed bill, just was released favorably from our Community Development and Small Business Committee in the legislature. So I'm going to be continuing to push for that to move forward. The State Senate also last year created a special task force on retail. So I know many of you in the room are in the retail space, many of you are not, but we all love and depend on our retailers in our downtowns. And retail is facing a very tough climate, as we all know. So much is moving online, particularly with millennials. There are challenges with people going across the border, to shop in New Hampshire or elsewhere, high costs. So this task force, which is bipartisan in the State Senate, we've been holding hearings and meetings around the state, getting feedback from our retailers and others about what are their challenges and what are the ways that we can seek to address those challenges. We can't solve every problem, but what are some of the things that we can do? So I encourage you, again, the retailers in the room or anybody, please, we want to hear your feedback, so I'd welcome the opportunity to talk more with you either this morning or later with your ideas around issues and challenges, particularly facing our retail community. I'm very pleased that our, this one's directed at Wakefield, so I'm sorry I can't report any good news here for Lynnfield, although maybe Representative Jones can, but working with Representative Brodeur and Representative Wong, we were... Don't forget, Jason, I speak after you. Good point. We were very pleased that we were able to secure in the current state budget for FY18 $100,000 for the Wakefield Main Streets Association, and that's been a priority for us. It's a wonderful initiative. They're doing great work in Wakefield. Selectman Donaco has been a big part of that, and others in the room, working closely with the Chamber, with Steve Mayo and the town government. And that's a great model for how we want to support our main streets in terms of streetscape improvements, complete streets, assistance to our local businesses with marketing and social media, and just in general making the downtown a really inviting place for people to come and shop, to play, to work, and making it really the energy hub of the community, and we all benefit from that. And then along with that, I just wanted to also give a shout out to the amazing work that's going on at the through the Albion Cultural Exchange. Is everyone familiar with that? Fantastic initiative. In a recent community conversation forum that I sponsored, which we held actually at the, it was called the Stoneham Theater, but they changed their name, so what's it called now? The Greater Boston Theater Company. Yes, I still think of it as the Stoneham Theater. We held a forum there, and we actually highlighted the Albion Cultural Exchange as a model for, the whole region and state in terms of using culture and the arts to, as a hub to bring people into the downtown, partnering with community organizations and with local businesses, and that is fab. So I think there's tremendous potential for that, and I'm really looking forward to continuing to support their efforts. There's a lot to talk about around the state budget and things that we're trying to support when it comes to our public schools, our local transportation, local aid, but I'm going to leave that topic because I suspect my colleagues may touch on some of that. I did want to mention that another area we're very focused on, both in the Senate and the House, which I'm sure is on many of your minds, is healthcare costs. High healthcare costs are a huge challenge, we know, for our families, for our small businesses in particular, and it's a huge challenge for our government, our municipal government and our state government. That's typically a huge part of our budget. We have been working on this issue for many years. We have passed, a series of different bills that are designed to improve the quality of care and attack healthcare costs, but we know there's always more we need to do. Back in November of last year, the State Senate debated and passed a very major and significant piece of legislation which is designed to continue to improve access to quality care for everyone, but really get at the underlying causes of high healthcare costs. So a lot of that has to do with the transition we're making away from fee-for-service, which tends to encourage more tests, more procedures, more care, but not necessarily quality and efficient care, moving away from that to outcome-based healthcare or value-based healthcare, which holds a lot of promise. We've seen this in our state and around the country to actually provide better care for people, more coordinated care, but also more efficient care and save money. So part of this legislation included a bill that I filed to encourage more the ability to use telehealth more in the state, something I've been working with the Massachusetts Health and Hospital Association on. It holds a lot of promise to provide more convenient care for people, particularly people who have transportation challenges or mobility or disability challenges, or just it's more convenient. So that's very exciting. Mobile integrated health is very exciting, which will be able to provide more care for people in their own homes, so avoiding unnecessary emergency room visits, which are very expensive. A lot of things around the prices of drugs as well. We're really in this legislation looking to tackle very high drug prices, which have been a big challenge for our insurers and our patients. So there's a lot of other things in there. The House of Representatives is now likely to debate their version of a health care bill in the coming months, which I look forward to seeing. And then the Senate and the House will work together to reconcile those so we can send Governor Baker what I hope will be a very strong bill that again, continues to make sure that Massachusetts is leading the country and the world in terms of our high-quality health care, supporting our community hospitals and our health centers and our major academic medical centers so they thrive, and at the same time that we can provide really efficient, cost-effective care to control costs. So that was a big topic I wanted to hit there on terms of policy. Just very quickly, we're also obviously working hard on transportation issues. The MBTA, the commuter rail in particular, critically important to this area. We're well aware of that and trying to make sure that we work with Governor Baker and Secretary Pollack to continue to improve the convenience and the reliability and the cost effectiveness of our transportation system. So that's a very big one we're working on. We're doing a lot of work as well on issues of substance use disorder, addiction, the opioid crisis, as well as underlying mental health issues, which often go hand in hand. That's something we're very focused on as well, and we do finally feel like we're bending the curve in terms of the tragedy of opioid abuse and the overdose deaths that we've seen in all of our communities. So we think we're finally making some good headway there, but a lot more work that we have to do there. So lots of other things that are going on around energy and the environment, and education as well. But I'm going to stop there because I know we've got some other speakers as well. And hopefully if we have some time for questions at the end, would love to hear that. But otherwise, thank you so much for all the good work you're doing in your businesses and community organizations and our communities. And again, really want to encourage you to share any feedback with me on any of these issues, particularly the work that we're doing to find ways to strengthen our local retailers and our local downtowns. So thank you all so much.
Thank you, Senator Lewis. We appreciate all your efforts on our behalf. I now would like to introduce to you our representative and minority speaker in the House. I'm going to restart my marks all over again, but what a nice crowd this was. Representative Brad Jones.
Thank you, John. No, I saw a bunch of people get up and leave, so I know it isn't anything I said because I hadn't said anything yet. So, Jason, it must have been something you said. I don't know. But seriously, it really is a privilege to be here. Many of you know me, some of you may not. My wife is from Wakefield. She used to be involved with the Chamber of Commerce. Steve knows her. She's on the Board of Corporators for the Savings Bank. And she was a selectman in Wakefield for many years back before we met and got married. And obviously I have the great pleasure of representing the town of Lynnfield. And Jason touched on so many things going on. Talked about legislative action, and quite often sometimes that's an oxymoron. Legislative action sometimes doesn't go hand in hand, but there really is a lot going on Beacon Hill. But even though there's a lot going on and there's a lot of issues, we also have to face the reality that we're approaching the middle of March. Our sessions end this year, the end of July, and there are a lot of issues. So the reality is we're going to be faced with deadlines and potentially the inability to get all the things done that anybody might like to get done. And obviously we're not through winter yet. That impacts the schedule on a routine basis. Jason talked towards the end of his remarks about health care, and we have the Senate debated their bill, as he said, last November. We're due to debate our bill after we take up the budgets, which will probably be sometime in May when we debate health care. But the chairman of the committee that was dealing with that in the House just passed away. So obviously that has an impact on scheduling if somebody's invested a lot of time in meeting and having a direction, and now having to have that work be picked up by other members. So those are the challenges that impact the schedule a lot. There are a tremendous number of very, very important pieces of legislation. A lot of bond bills. We have a housing bond bill that we've taken up in the House. The Senate, I think, is slated probably within the next month or so to take it up. That has to be reconciled, but that has to do with housing across a broad spectrum in the Commonwealth. That's a bill that absolutely must get done. The DCAM bond bill, the House and Senate have both taken it up. It's in the process of being reconciled by Conference Committee. But that has money to fix courthouses, many other kinds of governmental buildings. And when you see things like this winter coming, not having money in those accounts, bad things can happen. We just had a break at the State House, which was closed yesterday, but is going to take some time and resources to remedy. That's got to get done. The governor has filed a Chapter 90 bond bill that's got $200 million for local roadways. And I think if you've been driving around, I think you can probably find a few places to spend that if you can get your car out of the pothole. So that has to get done. The governor today is filing an environmental bond bill. The governor is filing today an economic development piece of legislation, and I don't know all the details, but I think it's going to have some more MassWorks money, which has been a great program to partner with cities and towns for projects across a broad spectrum. It can be economic development, it can be housing, but that's going to be a very, very important program, and that's going to be a piece of legislation that we have to get done. Obviously, we have the state budget. We'll debate it the third week in April. The Senate usually does it about a month after that. That has to get reconciled and then be done. The governor has the opportunity to then go through that and line item and veto, and then we want to have an opportunity before we adjourn for the year or recess for the year, formal sessions, to take up any vetoes that the legislature may want to override from the governor. We have criminal justice reform. The Senate and House both passed bills last fall. That conference committee is busy meeting, working, trying to resolve those differences. On top of that, we have marbled through that a whole ballot question process. And there are a number of questions. Obviously, a lot have heard about the fair share amendment, or the millionaire's tax, if you will, that would create a surcharge on income over $1 million of an additional 4%. That's before the SJC. We'll hopefully have an idea, hopefully in short order, but whether that will go forward or won't go forward, but that will be a big question. So that's one of the potential tax questions that voters will face this November. Coupled with that is an initiative to reduce the sales tax back to 5%. That's being heavily pushed by the Retailers Association. So you have those two tax questions. You have a bunch of other, I would say, issues that relate to business directly and indirectly. Potential increase in minimum wage. There's a potential to go from our current $11 up to $15, and there's a debate right now, and that would increase, obviously, the tip minimum wage as well, which would have potentially a huge impact to our restaurateurs, and whether there's any compromise that can be out there that may deal with a teen training wage, or address the time and a half, because if you go to a $15 an hour minimum wage and time and a half on a Saturday is now $22.50 to potentially be your first job at 16 bagging groceries, that doesn't sound too bad. But that potentially has an impact. Obviously, if you get one of those jobs, that's great, but if you're forced out because somebody doesn't have as many of those jobs available, that may not be a good thing. That may have an impact on summer employment for young adults. We have safe staffing question, which is going to have an impact on healthcare. And obviously, you guys are all in business. You can imagine if all of a sudden somebody says, you currently have 5 people doing something, and we're going to mandate that you have 10 people, and now you have to fight to make sure you get those people. That can drive costs up, and if wages are your biggest factor of doing business, that can have an impact, which could undercut some of the things that we're trying to do legislatively. So that is an important issue that's out there. Paid family and medical leave is another ballot question that's out there. And that's one that it potentially has an impact on the business community. And I know, and I don't want to, Paul and Jason are both in charge of the Committee of Jurisdiction. I know they're trying to meet with stakeholders to try to see if there's any common ground. My guess is there's not a lot of common ground right now. And I don't envy the challenge of trying to reach that common ground. But sometimes when one side feels like they have all the cards, their willingness to compromise and reach some agreement is not always there. So that's just a handful of the many issues that we face. And unfortunately, sometimes serving the legislature is an awful lot like being in high school, which is when is the deadline, and whenever the deadline is, that's when I'll start my project. And sometimes the price that's paid for that is important issues don't get addressed. And we're rapidly getting to that point in time where people can have that list of 20 things they'd like to get done. And, well, here's the list of 15 things they'd like to get done. Well, let's try to really get these 10 done, and then ultimately let's settle on getting these 5 done. So it is very, very important to keep engaged with your legislative delegation. And some of these ballot questions have real meaningful impact to your businesses. Please stay in touch. Please share your ideas, share your concerns. It's really been a pleasure to be here. I'm going to turn it over to my friend, Donald Wong.
Thank you, Representative Jones. And Representative Wong, would you please come to the podium?
Good morning. Thank you for coming out this early this morning. My daughter is back at my house with the 3 grandchildren because they don't have electricity. So I'm missing breakfast with them, which isn't always that bad. But I just want to let you know a little about myself. I'm in a family business, 3 generation. We have a small Chinese takeout on Route 1. This year will be 68 years. But in saying this, I know how hard it is for business people because we have to change with the times and we have to work with everyone. Business is almost like being a politician. You have customer service. Well, as a politician, we have more customers. But I've been on Ways and Means since day one. That's 8 years now. And Monday I'll be driving and hearing people from Pittsfield. And if you don't know where that is, that's way west, and it's still in Massachusetts. I put approximately 30,000 miles on my car a year because on Ways and Means, we do travel the state to hear what everyone has to say. And again, I want to thank Senator Lewis for the $100,000 that he passed in the Senate, but I also want to thank Brad Jones and Paul Brodeur, because it also passed in the House. For anything to become reality, it has to pass the House and the Senate. So that's why we have a great working relation with the House and the Senate to get things passed for the North Shore. Sorry, I'm looking at my iPhone trying to get everything done, and I'm Asian and it's not working. But, you know, in business, the profit margin is getting harder and harder to do. You know, it's become less. And one of the things that I'm looking at, and I hope that all the reps and senators look at, is the minimum wage. In California, not all, some of the towns and cities are at $15. But that doesn't mean that everyone benefit from this. I have a friend that has a restaurant in California where it's $15 an hour. He had a worker come to him and say, I'm full-time at $15 an hour. I now have to be part-time. And my friend said, what do you mean you have to be part-time? You're a great worker. I'm paying you $15 an hour. He says, well, I need my benefits too. The $15 won't cover the benefits I get at a lower wage. So now I have to be a part-time worker. So you're losing a good full-time worker because it went too high. And the affordability. The other thing is, with $15 an hour, we're going to lose a lot of summer jobs. Because if you have $100 a day that you can pay for full-time, for workers, you know, like DCR and other places, at $15 an hour, you can hire 6 people. At $10 an hour, you hire 10 people. So you're going to get less kids working. So I think there should be maybe a special price for students or people that are training. The other thing is, sorry about that. This iPhone is not working too well. We're looking at taxes and accountability, and we're also looking at the gas tax and the mileage tax that some people are talking about. When the gas was at a high level, a lot of people that had business for their deliveries, the deliveries would have an extra service charge on it for delivering because the gas was so high. So if you make the gas tax, is it gonna be hurting the business again? Because the business is what drives the economy. The businesses like you are the one that hire people and get people working so that they can spend money. And the other thing is, if they do put this mileage tax, which they say is going to be for education and the roads, let them put it down in writing so we have it there. If you're going to fix the roads, and don't put it in general fund where you don't know where it's going to be later on. And again, I thank everyone for inviting us here, and please call us and work with us. We want to work with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Donald. And now I'd like to introduce our Representative Paul Brodeur. Mr. Brodeur.
I'm just delighted there's still people here to listen when you're the fourth speaker at a breakfast thing. Amen. And I should say the delegation is also one person short, because for our friends in Lynnfield, you all know that Brendan Crichton, a colleague of mine from Lynn, is your new state senator. I've had the opportunity to work with Brendan since he got in the legislature. He's going to do a terrific job for you. You should be very, very excited that he is coming on board. I want to shout out to my friends that help represent Wakefield. Though I do need to correct Representative Wong on one thing that he said. He said that as a politician, he has more customers than he does as a businessman. Now, we represent in the House about 40 to 42,000 people per district, and my experience is that's the lunch rush at Kowloon. So I think he maybe flipped his numbers a little bit. My colleagues have done a terrific job talking about the broad range of challenges we face. And what I'd like to do is talk maybe a little bit about how we go about it and why there is a lot of good news around the Massachusetts economy. And to amplify what Senator Lewis said, our biggest challenge for growth right now, a lot of businesses, particularly folks with the Associated Industries of Mass, do this survey, and their number one problem right now is finding talent. I will tell you there are a lot of states across the country that would be delighted to have that problem. It is something that we, as a legislature and as the co-chairs, Senator Lewis and I, of Labor and Workforce, really, really are focused in on, because that is kind of a long-term structural barrier to even greater growth. The thing that we do best here in Massachusetts is produce smart people and give them the opportunity to put ideas into action. Without that kind of, particularly in the middle skills area workforce, that limits our ability to grow. So a lot of what we need to do, and what we are kind of attacking on all fronts, is this idea of how do we strengthen that long-term skills pipeline so that as these great ideas emerge, we have the ability to bring them to market. Again, in terms of how we do business as a state politically, I want to point out that this is a fairly unique dynamic that we have here right now. We have the local chambers of commerce getting together and listening to two Republicans and two Democrats talk about the state of the Commonwealth and the future of the Commonwealth. And we're in the same room, we're at the same table. I don't think the food was poisoned either way or anything like that. Mr. Leader, you. I am a little bit concerned about the armaments that were offered up at the on your way in. And that isn't to say that we agree on everything, quite the contrary. But I suggest to you, if the Chamber of Commerce, say in, I don't know, in Dallas, Texas, tried to do this, this would not be what you would see. You would see you probably wouldn't see us in the same room. You would probably have, dueling Facebooks, dueling videos, whatever the case may be. And we just do our best, really, to not do it that way. We strive when we can to build consensus, to bring the best ideas forward from wherever they come, and bring them forward. And that's why you see us all here together. Again, we don't always agree maybe on the methodology, but there's a great deal of consensus in Massachusetts on what the problems are and how, and the urgency with which we need to address them. To that point, I want to touch a little bit on a couple of the ballot questions, particularly the paid family and medical leave and the minimum wage. Those, Leader Jones mentioned one side kind of holding all the cards. What he's referring to is the polling on both those questions. They're very, in the abstract, they are very, very, very popular. In particular, paid family and medical leave, which is provided in some way, shape, or form in just about every other country in the world. That polls at around 80+%. Pick your demographic, pick your political affiliation. Across the board, it's very, very, very popular. It's also a very, very complicated issue. How do you build it? What are the impacts? And that is where ballot questions don't always do such a great job. So Senator Lewis and I, and quite frankly, the entire leadership of both parties in both the House and Senate, are seeking to work out the details and not necessarily to head off the ballot question. I don't mean to be disrespectful to anyone that's involved in the process, but to build, if we can, a thing that works for workers, works for businesses, and is fiscally sound, is actuarially stable. That's a hard job. It's very detail-oriented, but that is our job, and that is what we endeavor to do. And to that end, we bring in all the folks that you might imagine, sometimes by themselves, but more commonly, we sit everyone across the table from each other, and I don't want to say let them have at it, but kind of let them have at it, and encourage, above all, real-life experiences and candor in what we're trying to get to. And you see that sometimes it works well, sometimes we can't get there, and it will go to the ballot. And then I think we will continue to have the discussion that was started here today, particularly to the details of the ballot questions at hand. I also want to touch a little bit on some of the local stuff, because this is a truly bipartisan thing. Historically, and certainly on the federal level, sometimes earmarks have a bad name, and they suggest waste or fraud. That is not what I have seen in the work in this district, and I'll give you an example from a little bit outside, and it's not exactly an earmark, but it's a way the state and a municipality can work together to achieve great things. And I represent a small part of Malden. And Malden, from back in the day, had this place called McFadden Manor, which, if you can imagine, this is something that would never happen today. This is a nursing home run by the city of Malden. Its time has passed. And the property, right near Pine Banks, fell into horrible disrepair. And it's not an economically viable building. It's old, and the development costs would be really daunting. But the state has this historic tax credit program that was applied to this McFadden Manor project that created a fiscally viable opportunity to develop a somewhat affordable assisted living. Now, y'all know what the demographics are of Massachusetts and the aging of the baby boomers and the need across the spectrum for different types of care. Well, that tax credit, combined with a terrific developer and very efficient, active, concerned local government, is producing a tremendous result. The dollars that are going to Albion Cultural Exchange and the Main Streets program, that is the future of local economic development. And a bipartisan delegation that represents Wakefield, along with a Republican administration and local and municipal partners in Wakefield, developed a plan not just to dump money into downtown, but to say, what can we do to increase the viability of the downtown in Wakefield? Well, arts is an attraction. Foot traffic is important. So what do? We take the old municipal gas and light building. The town very wisely, instead of selling it off for a quick buck, retained it with state dollars. We're going to redevelop that. You've already seen it. You've already seen the success. And that is going to drive downtown and create other opportunities for growth. In Melrose, in the Franklin Street area, we had MassWorks money create traffic improvements which have set the table for important local municipal-oriented development. Transit-oriented development, which means, that is the future of development here in Massachusetts. It's the way we're going to get a handle on housing costs that are really a limit on economic growth. And that was done, again, in a bipartisan manner with input from local officials that have a great deal of knowledge about how state resources applied on the ground in your hometown can make a big difference. That's really what we're here to do. And when we say we want to hear from you, that's why. Because we kind of have our fingers on a couple levers, but you guys know best where those resources can be best applied to improve your communities, to improve your business environment, and to improve quality of life, which is ultimately our job and how we should be judged. So I appreciate the time to be here to kind of bat cleanup, and I'm going to go out on a limb here and say we would be delighted to take your questions. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Representative Brodeur. Before I let you go, and I'm about to do that, are there any questions that we can? Why am I not surprised? Please go right ahead.
I have a question and a statement to make here. So my name is Rada Frauenstein, and this is directly to our representative here. I own a business downtown Wakefield. This is going to be 10 years, but totally 14 years in Wakefield. So I'm a small business owner. Historically, I never paid minimum wages when I started a business. I felt uncomfortable paying an adult woman working in my boutique minimum wage. So I'm all for it to a point. What I'm not saying here that it's being considered, maybe understood, or even thought about it. So when I run my payroll, now I own 2 stores. I run a payroll through Paycheck. So the payroll now that we went to $11, of course, nobody I paid at that time 11 except like a teenager or somebody that runs like a once in a while a part-time job. So now I'm paying them, those people, $12 and so on. Now, what I am going to be faced when I pay somebody $15, somebody that is working for me for 5 years, 3 years, 10 years, I can't possibly, they're not going to be comfortable being paid a minimum wage, same as the teenager that I hire for the summer, or somebody else that does not have as many skills. Now you have to also consider that I have to add $3 to $5 per employee, and that $15 will cost me really $20 because I'm paying all other payroll taxes, all other deduction, payroll, paycheck company that charges me monthly. So now, as a business owner in the retail industry, it's very hard. Now I'm going to be faced, do I keep 2 stores? Do I close one? Which one is less productive? Where do I close on the main street and the potential being busy? How many employees would I need to reduce the hours? How many can I actually do it? Do I have to now work more hours because I'm now a mom, so I have an employee who take care of that. So I would probably be faced by closing a store on Main Street, and mind you, I invested $50,000 10 years ago to build my location downtown Wakefield, my own personal money. So I just don't see it as benefiting small businesses like myself, and I'm not going to be able to afford that, because it's not only 15 for me. It's a lot more per hour that I have to pay, because I do pay them legally. So I don't know the solution to that, but having base skills pay, that's to me make more sense, and I don't have a big money behind me on it. So,
Well, Rada, let me ask you this. Oh, all right, Senator, you're right here. I was just
sure,
going
I'll take a step.
I was going to say, Rada, before, just so we don't keep everybody, Senator did offer to meet with us, and maybe we could pursue this in a smaller group at another time. I'll let you address it
Sure.
now, but
Happy to.
I'd like to set something
Yeah.
up locally. We could meet with your office and discuss this in
Great
great
idea.
detail. Wonderful.
That's a great idea. I think we'd be happy to do that. So just quickly, thank you for sharing that, and certainly your perspective and concerns about the minimum wage going up and what that would mean for your business and your ability to hire and stay in business. We've heard that. You're not alone. We've certainly heard that from many other, particularly small business owners, and we're acutely aware and sensitive to that. Just to clarify, just a few quick things for those who may not know. So Massachusetts was at $8 an hour for a pretty long time, and I think this must have been about 4 years ago now. The legislature did pass a bill to gradually raise the minimum wage from 8 to 11. So we did that over 3 years, and we're at $11 an hour now. And generally, I hear from most businesses that they've been able to absorb that reasonably well. So, that's good news. Although still a challenge, I know, for some. What's happening now, and this was alluded to by Brad and Paul, is that there's an organization called the Raise Up Coalition that has gathered enough signatures to raise the minimum wage from $11 to $15. They propose to do that not overnight, over a 4-year period. So over 4 years, they propose to raise it to that. That is something that they have on their own, gathered, I don't know, 130,000 signatures from across the state, and it's a grassroots effort. And right now, that would go on the ballot in November, when we have the November election. So everyone will get a chance to weigh in on that, whether the minimum wage should go from 11 to 15 over 4 years, if that's on the ballot. However, because of the concerns you're raising, because this is a complicated issue, how do we phase it in? What would the right increase be? Should there be, Brad and Donald both mentioned this notion of whether we should have some kind of a training wage, potentially for young people. Some states do have that. Massachusetts doesn't currently. There are very strong arguments on both sides on that issue. What happens to the tip minimum wage? That's very important to our restaurants, because that's a lower minimum wage that restaurants pay. Should the minimum wage be indexed to inflation? Currently, we don't index it. There's arguments about that. There's a lot of complicated and challenging issues. There's a lot of economic research here on sort of what the impact of the minimum wage is and how much it helps the local economy on one hand, but also challenges small businesses. So that's why our preference is, if we can resolve this through the legislative process, by debating it, by studying it, by working in a bipartisan manner, House, Senate, we'd have to work with Governor Baker, that would be our preference. And Representative Brodeur and I are kind of spearheading that to some extent, because we chair the Committee of Jurisdiction. That said, at the end of the day, the Raise Up organization, they hold the cards. I mean, if they decide that whatever the legislature is proposing to do is not adequate or sufficient as they see it, they can go to the ballot. So obviously we're talking to them. We want to hear all the concerns like what you've raised. We want to work with the Raise Up Coalition. For example, should we, if we're going to increase the minimum wage, if that is going to happen one way or the other, maybe should we take more than 4 years to get to $15 an hour? Should it be over a longer period of time, or other ways to manage that? The last thing I would say, and again, I would love to have a smaller group. Back to the early challenge I mentioned in my remarks. Unfortunately, even at $11 an hour, if you're working full time, earning $11 an hour, your annual you're taking home, I think roughly was it $22,000, something like that, a year in annual income. You can't live on $22,000, in this area. There's probably a few places, even in Massachusetts, you could live on that. So people who are earning the minimum wage, are having to work 2 jobs, 3 jobs. They're not home for their kids. That causes a whole another set of issues. It's just you can't make ends meet. Now, I appreciate you were saying you pay more than minimum wage, which is you're trying to pay a living wage, and that's many of our employers try to do that, and that's very helpful. Unfortunately, many of our employers, and some of them are really large, fast food chains and some of our very large retailers, they do pay minimum wage. I mean, starting out. And you can't, in a high-cost area like the Greater Boston region, you can't live on that. So, that's the fundamental tension here: is what do we pay people that they can, if they work full time and they work hard, they can support themselves and their families, and at the same time balance our business's ability to continue to be viable, and have a cost structure that's affordable. So don't have all the answers, but I want you to thank you for the feedback. We're working on it, and I love the idea of getting together maybe a little smaller group where we can sit around a table together and to do that. Can we work with you on that, John? Okay, thanks everyone.
Rada, I commit to you. I'll get that set up, and we'll keep it moving forward.
Can I just add one thing real quick?
Sure. Well, why not?
One way you could help Rada is,
Come on up, Paul.
on Thursday, March 22nd, right on Main Street in Melrose from 4 to 8, Rada is having a night of fashion, beauty, and celebration. Isn't that correct? And it says something here about a free gift and awesome cocktails. So, not to be flip, but that's not such a bad thing either. No doubt.
All right, I'm going to let you go in a second. One quick thing, I didn't talk a lot about what the chamber activities involve because there are many, but I would be remiss if I didn't at least give a plug to the biggest fundraiser in the community that benefits the library and the chamber, and that is the Blossoms at the BB's coming up in April. So I hope if you haven't participated already, you'll buy a table, you'll buy tickets, or you'll even make a donation and be a sponsor. It benefits the beautiful, beautiful library in downtown Wakefield. It's a tremendous event. This year's theme is the 60s event. So I know a few you in this room have lived through that experience. I won't identify you or single you out. But please come down. It's a tremendous event. It raises a lot of money. And once more, I wanted to thank the legislators because they do sit together. They do cooperate. The local leadership is great with Rob and Steve and the board's members that are here. And we have a great legislative group. So back to my point in the beginning, we have thriving, vibrant towns, great leadership, and a lot of opportunity. So let's all keep it going, pull it together, and have a wonderful day. And enjoy yourself. And I hope you get to shower tonight when you get home. Thank you very, very much.